Where do you see this going with these believers in Iran? Do you think they're going to stay there and multiply the church over there? Are they going to get run out of the country? Are they going to get killed? What?
Well, it's interesting that, a lot of them do want to leave because it's very repressive over there. Matter of fact, this prophecy in Jeremiah 49 says that there will be a disaster where they will actually lead to an expulsion, a worldwide diaspora, if you will, of Iranians going out into every nation in the world. It says there will be no nation where the outcasts of Islam will not go. So it's really, as I've spoken to some of these people involved in this expanse of what's going on over there, they're actually looking to this prophecy as good news and hope for them to get out of Iran into the nations of the world.
Okay, so now let's clarify for the average listener who may not be as tuned in as perhaps you might be, Bill Salas, and that's who I am talking to. You're listening to Understanding the Times Radio. I'm Jan Markell. You can learn more at his website, prophecydepot.com, prophecydepot.com. We carry the book, Olive Tree Views, views as in viewpoint, olivetreeviews.org. Go to our products, Nuclear Showdown in Iran, Revealing the Ancient Prophecy of Elam, and you believe that this prophecy is separate from the Ezekiel 39 prophecy. Is that correct?
I do, and in the book I list about a little more than a half a dozen reasons, and I'll just give your listeners a couple of them that really stand out mostly. One is these are different battle zones. There's the one dealing with the prophecy of Elam. Probably need to preface this visually for your listeners because they're not, as they're listening, they're not really seeing a map of the ancient territories. A modern-day map of Iran would depict in the ancient times Elam, which would be by the Persian Gulf, and then Persia would be the predominant area of the rest of Iran. So when Jeremiah and Ezekiel wrote, they were contemporaries of each other. Now, Jeremiah wrote this prophecy around 596 B.C., Ezekiel's ministry was around 593 to 573, 571 B.C. So he wrote closely in tandem with Jeremiah. But Ezekiel wrote about Persia, and Jeremiah wrote about Elam. Now, there's two different battle zones. That's one dissimilarity. Ezekiel's clearly talking in several passages in his Ezekiel 38 and 39 that battle is upon the mountains of Israel. It's in Israel. They'll be burying the dead in Israel. And so many details that it's clear that that's in Israel, whereas this prophecy with Elam is dealing with a disaster in Elam. One other quick glaring one is that Ezekiel 38 lists 9 members in a coalition in the latter days that comes together to invade the nation of Israel. But he's very specific about who he lists, but he does not list Elam. He lists Persia. And you wonder, well, why did he omit Elam? Did he not know about Elam? Well, he did know about Elam. Several reasons. Elam was Noah's grandson, and he was back in the time of Abraham. We see he's showing up in the book of Genesis and his descendants. So he certainly knew about him, but he also writes about him. In Ezekiel 32, he does a prophecy about Elam. So why does he omit them in Ezekiel 38? So I go through those couple reasons, and there's many others. I think the listener will agree with me that these are two distinctly different prophecies.
Interestingly enough, Elam is where the Bushehr nuclear plant is, and it's also where 3 tectonic plates meet. Now, as we speak, Bill Salas, obviously there's nuclear tension in that part of the world, and I'm sure you were just as horrified as I was last November 2013 when we learned that the P5+1, and that included China, Germany, included, of course, John Kerry, spurred on by Barack Obama-Kerry team there, along with 3, 4, 5 other nations, virtually giving Iran the okay with their nuclear program, and their supposedly work conditions. Whether or not that ever comes to pass, I don't know that that's going to happen. I'm sure you were as horrified as I was, and imagine how Israel felt and feels even today when we see the world basically sanctioning the mullahs over there having a nuclear bomb. But the thing you bring out is that one of those nuclear sites, it's called Bushehr, the Bushehr nuclear plant, sitting on a site that is well known to be an area of some seismic activity. Talk to us about that.
Well, this is a very dangerous facility, Jan. Like you said, it's at the intersection of 3 tectonic plates. It's in one of the most actively seismic regions in the world. There have been earthquakes over there, one recently of last year. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But it started to be built in 1975 with the Germans, but after the Shah was deposed and the Islamic Revolution came in, then Iran tried to start building upon the German construction parts, and that wasn't working well, so they then got the Russian Ministry for Atomic Energy in 1995 to start helping them with that facility. So you have three tectonic plates, and you have three different types of construction materials and designs on there, and it's a 40-year-old design with a 30-year-old coolant system with a highly untrained staff that is ill-equipped to face any kind of an accident. And the reason that is of concern, of course, when you look at the seismic activity over there, but also you look at the recent example in 2011 of that 9.0 Tohoku quake that affected Fukushima nuclear plant. Now, studies have been done that the Bushehr nuclear plant, due to its frailties and poor construction design, could create much, much worse disaster if there was an earthquake or a strategic strike on it than Chernobyl and the Fukushima scenario. Now, this is because of an earthquake that happened in April of 2013. It was a 7.7 in Iran near the border of Pakistan that was followed by a really huge aftershock of a 6.3 at Bushehr, specifically at Bushehr. It killed 35 people. When that happened, the Arab states, they call them the GCC, the Gulf Cooperative Council, there's those Arab states that line the other side of the Persian Gulf to the west. Iran, of course, has the east of the Persian Gulf. They did a study because 2/3 of the world's desalination plants are in that area there with those Arab states. Drinking and potable water is very difficult for them to come by. And when they saw this earthquake happen, they did a study, and they realized that they are at high risk because of wind patterns. They could actually come over to those states over there and pollute their water supplies. Literally tens of thousands could be killed, and hundreds of thousands could have cancerous problems and symptoms as a result. Whereas, coincidentally, or oddly, Iran itself generally may be unaffected except for the isolated area there because there's this 550-mile long mountain range that's 150 miles wide called the Zagros Mountains that has always kept those territories geographically isolated between Elam and Persia, like we talked about earlier. So the Gulf states are very, very concerned. Of course, Saudi Arabia is one of those Gulf states, and they decided what they want to do is spend $10 billion to construct one of the longest pipelines in the world that will be done by 2020, not for oil transportation, Jan, but for water purposes, to go up through Oman, up through UAE, through Qatar, Bahrain, all the way up through Saudi Arabia, through Kuwait, so they could insulate themselves from the potential catastrophe of a Bushehr nuclear problem. And you know, the prophecy talks about a disaster coming that may be referring to this type of a disaster, Jan. This type of